One of the key things that brought me to Tesla early on in 2012 was the emergence of the electric vehicle and Tesla as the leader, with Elon Musk at the front face and getting a lot of news and attention. There was this very unique investing community that was created around the Tesla Motors Club, which had an investors forum, which I stumbled upon when I was trying to figure out what to put my $5,000 in at that time. I didn't have a lot, but I had something. And there was just such a unique community that was built around it from an investing perspective that was saying a lot of things that the mainstream media wasn't saying. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. People like Dave Lee with his mega threads back in the day. He's really one of the main reasons why I discovered Tesla and decided to invest in the first place. Folks like Emmett Peppers were there, James Stevenson as well. So these OG early Tesla folks. Over the years, it became quite obvious, in my opinion, that the company has a lot going for it. And it still feels like it's very much in its infancy of its full potential. I've invested a lot of time researching it, and it has a phenomenal investing community around it where I can bounce ideas off of.
At Tesla, how does the idea cycle actually go? I think someone said that it gets put into an AI stuff and you get answers. And I was like, that sounds a bit too good to be true. But I mean, you work there, so maybe you could share a bit more information.
I'll speak from experience. It's a giant company, over 100,000 people. So I can only speak about my experience, but we definitely didn't have an AI. We had the opposite. We had a bunch of people that were all extremely tired and working extremely hard. And we had to use this. I wouldn't even call it an eye. It was just a brain that's built to solve problems as quickly as we can. From my experience, Tesla worked is the iteration and not having a fear of failure is really the key drivers for Tesla's ability to come up with great ideas. So they've built this culture where every person at the company essentially has the ability to bring forward ideas and implement those ideas because the leadership teams have been taught to harness the people that we've hired. There's a ton of incredible leaders out there. My leader from Tesla is one of my closest friends now. His name's Greg. The culture was, it doesn't matter what level you're in. If you have an idea, bring it forward. And if it sounds like a good idea and you've done the diligence to try it, usually within 24 hours, you're working on the solution already. And sometimes things were implemented the same day. The amount of bureaucracy at the company is much, much less, almost non-existent in a lot of areas that I was exposed to, especially versus other large companies. That's a giant advantage. And I think for those that have had a chance to read the Elon Musk biography by Walter Isaacson, I highly recommend you read that book because you get so much insight into why that culture exists and how Elon Musk is a very important piece of that puzzle to ensure that people are held accountable to uphold that standard. That's the mechanism. It's not very different from just being unrelentingly okay with trying stuff all the time that will fail. And without artificial intelligence, I feel like that's the best way humans can figure stuff out. And the company not firing you for at least trying hard, you are okay trying hard and failing as long as you're trying hard, and ensuring you have a culture that embraces that and empowers people to try that. Since you've hired some of the best talent enough, if not the best talent in the world, those people will find the most optimal solution, and you just keep trying over and over and over again. And that's why you have a automaker that can produce the cars it does. That's why you have a rocket company in SpaceX that can create rockets that go up and come back down. And I think the one booster has 17 flights already, like 17 flights on the same booster. You don't do that unless you have a culture that forces people to try stuff and not be punished for failing.
Where do you think Tesla could go wrong from here?
I think there's levels of weaknesses and there's levels of potential, say, hurdles and roadblocks that Tesla's going to encounter. And they range from, yeah, it's going to suck, but they'll get over it eventually, to, oh, if this happens, it's going to have a material impact specifically to the stock price and potentially the long-term valuation of the company. In my opinion, Keyman risk is by far the largest. As much as the team around him and the culture he's built is second to none, in my opinion, it still very much hinges on this individual going out there and just forcing the issue constantly, because you require that level of sort of willingness to go through pain. If Elon Musk was removed from that equation, I think things like the bot or the adoption rate of full self-driving are dramatically impacted, especially the Optimus robot. So these long-term moonshot ideas for the company that, as long as Elon Musk is involved, in my opinion, have a better chance than not to come to fruition. Those become very much at risk. But the longer he's at the company, the lower that risk becomes, because now I've taken additional time to build out the team, build out the processes, build on the manufacturing, and really implement the things you need to implement for that to happen. The second one that I can think of is, as Tesla's influence grows, Elon is very much not afraid to speak his mind. And you can already see that he's being attacked in the US media quite a bit, especially from partisan media outlets, let's call them.
In Europe as well, by the way.
Okay. That's actually good to know. He's a magnet for attention, positive and negative. Human beings being human beings, there might be an environment where they'll make it arbitrarily difficult, or difficult for the sake of being difficult because they don't like him, to get stuff through. You see stuff like the DOJ, the Department of Justice, looking into this glass house that doesn't exist, supposedly going after him for these like nonsensical things. You got the FAA being very slow in approving a Starship thing. These could just be part of the natural process of ensuring we have checks and balances in the United States and other countries abroad. But it also brings up, hey, as long as humans are in charge of these systems and Elon continually pushes against those systems, it would be naive to think that those systems won't fight back. That is a significantly lower risk than, say, the key man risk, but it's still a risk. What it will probably do is delay Tesla's ability to reach its maximum potential. But I feel like it will still reach its maximum potential. Eventually, it will get there, short of a monopoly. And I think really that's a legitimate long-term risk for Tesla's valuation, is that it gets so large that monopoly will come into play, and we will have to be forced to break them up and make a AI division, make an auto division, make an energy division. That is a legitimate long-term risk. But that assumes a significant increase in the valuation of the company, which, as a Tesla bull and a long-term investor, I think that's the most likely scenario. So that's the real one.
Currently, we can also see every week there's a new announcement of another country that wants Tesla to invest in that country. So there's no shortage of interest in seeing Tesla succeed around the world. It's going to have a small impact on globalization, moving stuff from China to Europe to the United States. It makes sense. We went one way too fast. We went from manufacturing stuff in our country and then like basically Control-Alt-Delete, everything goes to China. We're left with basically nothing. We've seen that with the semiconductor industry, which is going to be a big story, I think, in the later stages of this decade.
Huge. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the success for Tesla is pretty certain, let's say. But like with Apple and Steve Jobs, there is a difference in maximum potential. With Steve Jobs, I think the maximum potential of Apple would have been much higher. Right now with Tim Cook, he's done a tremendous job for his shareholders and everything, but innovation-wise, it hasn't been that great, right? I think with Tesla, key man risk is the number one. Going into a more negative thing, in the last couple of years, is there something that you're like, maybe they shouldn't have done this, maybe Elon shouldn't have done that?
I think when he initially bought Twitter and his rhetoric was extreme, I think that was a bummer, because as the referee, call it, of the platform, and Dave really and I had a discussion on this, he started off with the worst foot possible to create a place for everybody to come together. It was like, I just bought the company and here are my viewpoints. Like, oh shit. So he's dug himself in a hole at the very beginning, where he's already put people that already didn't like him to just be like, this guy is a complete, he's just crazy. And you kind of see this already on X, where you have people that will never buy a blue check mark because Elon Musk is the owner, right? So, and one could say, okay, that's a very small percentage of the population. Is it really going to materially impact the platform's ability to be successful in the long term? Probably not. Is it going to delay it? Yes. That was one where, when he initially bought the company, this very grandiose, all-inclusive mission statement that seemed to maximize the number of people that could gravitate towards it was minimized by him exercising his free speech, which I think talks more about the environment that we're in more than anything, because we're like, oh, that's wrong, that's messed up. It's like, okay, well, it's another human being who has an opinion. Is that really that bad, right? So, but I do view it as a negative, because Twitter's and X's long-term success was delayed because of that. But that's okay. On the flip side, it's going to create a dynamic where they're going to have to be forced to create such a great product that even people that hate Elon have to use it, which will ensure that the product is as good as it possibly can be. But when it comes to execution on technology and execution on product, I just think he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT that's especially alive today. Those folks tend to surround themselves with extremely talented people that will help them achieve what they're looking for. I think whatever mistakes he makes will be fixable. And that's why things like don't impact me that much, because I know they can overcome it.
I agree, because when you build something so good, then people will use it regardless if they like the person or not. I remember when Mark Zuckerberg, everybody was looking at him like he's a robot, an alien, nobody likes him. But now Threads, anti-Elon platform, anti-Twitter is like, oh, Lord and Savior.
Amazon in the US is perfect. So many people hate Jeff Bezos,
yeah,
but literally people cannot live without Amazon.
I mean, to me, Amazon membership is one of the best memberships out there. So yeah, I agree with that. And I think we dodged a couple of bullets talking about the next generation platform. Thank God there are other people at the company that can convince him to think about the so-called model to not only be a robot taxi. That would have been a huge mistake in my opinion. And I think the same could be said about just building it in Giga Mexico. I think he was like, oh, I'm okay with going to live in Mexico for a while to build this new next generation platform. So everybody else must be okay with that. And I think he noticed that, no, that's not going to work. What's your view of what's going on right now with the UAW strikes? How is the competition going to survive? Because I've seen the demands. It's looking for a short-term pay, but this will lead to the inevitable bankruptcy and these people will be without a job, or the government will just come back and say, oh, here, take some money.
It's an interesting dynamic because I don't think it could have come at a worse time for the legacy automakers. They're already at a disadvantage from a price perspective against Tesla and EVs because they're losing money when they're making them and they don't have the supply chains and the economies of scale and the expertise to build cars as cheaply as Tesla can. So from that perspective, they're already at a disadvantage. Then you have the UAW coming on top of it and saying, we're going to force a 2 to 5% cost increase across the board on your company because you suck and you're not paying our workers enough and you're in a union and you owe us money, right? And if you don't do that, we shut down your factories. Okay, so GM, Ford, and Stellantis lose. They lose, regardless if they don't or do agree to the UAW. This is just going to create an environment where legacy automakers, specifically those three, are going to have a bigger cost disadvantage into the future, which is the biggest variable that people look for when purchasing an EV. It's price. Like, I want to buy an EV because it fits my budget. And then charging and range is like in tandem with that, but cost is really one of the primary variables. You take that, and then you have a scenario starting next year where you're going to have the EV tax credit being included at the point of sale for cars that qualify, which Tesla will continue to qualify for most of the models, and other automakers have to figure out how to localize their supply chain in higher cost, potentially environments to create EVs, which additionally puts them in a more disadvantage. And now you've created this environment in addition to the UAW where legacy automakers are going to be so uncompetitive from a pricing perspective that they're going to be forced to look in the up market. They're going to be forced to sell EVs, let's say between the $50,000 to $80,000 plus level, whereas Tesla will have basically the $20,000 to $50,000 level all to its own. And that's where most buyers are. And what is a huge advantage that Tesla will have on top of that once they sell to those customers is because they are selling the most units of EVs, they're going to have the most data for their full self-driving stack. And when we go to autonomous in the next, 1 to 10 years, who's going to have an outsized advantage from that perspective? It's Tesla. So the UAW is just an accelerant. The Innovator's Dilemma, for those that haven't read that book, I would suggest you read that book because it just outlines the variables that are at play here with legacy automakers. And that's why they can't just simply flip a switch and make EVs. They have too many legacy things going on that are going to keep them from doing that. And the UAW, the union, is a major variable because they're the ones that are actually building the cars. So yeah, it's ugly. It's getting real ugly for the legacy automakers. And I think what will probably happen is in the next few years, they will call back to this moment as a reason why they need help. And if the US government is convinced that if they don't bail them out, it will have a material impact to the economy, then they'll bail them out. It's going to get weird. I think that there is a chance that Tesla becomes a major part of that bailout in some way as a player that helps these automakers transition. Who knows? Maybe Tesla will get part ownership. Who knows? I have no freaking idea. But I think Tesla's going to be involved in that at some point. they're going to be a player in rescuing the legacy autos, because there are too many jobs that are tied to that. If those jobs were to disappear in the next 6 to 9 month period, that it will have a serious major consequences to the US economy. So it's a weird place to be, but it's legacy automakers should have prepared for this much sooner. And now they're fighting for their survival.
Because I think a bailout makes sense only if you think that investments make sense. Doesn't make sense if a couple of years later you have to come back and bail them out yet again. I think you're right that maybe Tesla will play a role. I think maybe Apple might play a role. The Apple car was supposed to come out already 3 times, but
that's what they're waiting for.
For sure, they can scoop them up. But the big issue for me is that the culture is completely different. Apple people, Tesla people are not like GM or Ford. So I don't know how that will work. But for sure, I could see manufacturing jobs being picked up by companies like Tesla. Talking about legacy, you're in Texas. Oil is a pretty big deal there. Can you understand the negativity towards EV, towards sustainable energy, while constantly bashing on that industry, which makes our lives currently for the foreseeable future still a good one?
Yeah, I can definitely see it. One of my good friends from here, his name's Travis, and he used to work in an oil field. He's a diehard Texan. He loves his F-250. He didn't know anything about EVs. If anything, he had a negative connotation with EVs until he met me and I introduced him to my Model Y. And he was like, what the hell? And I had no idea this thing was this crazy. But I understand where they're coming from, because they have this mindset of it's not going to be able to fit my needs. And so I think it's bad. In addition to, Americans tend to hate being told what to do. Like they hate it. And when the government is coming out with incentives to transition to EVs, it's perceived as if they're trying to force me to give up my gas car. I'm going to resist it even more. So that's a variable. And then when you think about the feature set of an EV, Americans tend to like their cars do the exceptions. And so what I mean by that is people will buy the pickup truck that can haul 10,000 pounds and go 500 miles in a gas tank just in case they need it. But they may not ever use it, but they like knowing that just in case I am Ted from a ranch in Texas and I got to go rescue my buddy that's stuck in the mud and I got to bring his trailer with me. That's like, okay, I better buy a truck that can do that, right? So, which I completely get. Like, I completely understand. That's what makes this country so awesome, is people can just buy things just in case they need them. It's a sign of prosperity. But I think as the transition furthers, like as EVs become more and more commonplace, I think what you're going to start to see is that the cost advantage of EVs are going to be too great to ignore. And what most people don't get that owning a gas car is that it's significantly more convenient to own an EV versus a gas car, because you never have to go to the gas station. You just charge at home. And so as long as you have that charge at home variable, the EV makes way more sense than a gas car. Way more sense. Outside of the very unique exceptions of having to go 2,000 miles on a weekend, pulling a trailer, so you need an F-250 with a 1,000-mile gas tank. Okay, great. Yeah, EV won't do that. But how many people actually need that? It's like, what, 1% of the population, maybe less? So we'll see. This is going to be an evolution. And I think as education and more EVs are on the road, it's just going to force people to look into it. Be like, okay, why are there so many freaking EVs on the road? Like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand it. I think most people are very reasonable and they can problem solve quite well, and they're critical thinkers. So they're like, okay, why are there so many Teslas on the road? And then they'll fall into a bunch of articles and videos and stuff of people talking about it. And then they'll end up going and being like, okay, maybe this makes sense for me. Let me see how much it costs. Holy crap, I can buy a Tesla compact car for $25,000 and it drives itself, maybe. Holy shit, let me place an order right now. That's probably what's going to happen.
I can understand both sides. I can understand the people that are not extremely pro EVs right now. Like you said, they don't like to be told that you have to sell your car right now to buy something else. I think eventually, like with every innovation, if it becomes cheap enough and the standard stays the same or becomes even better, the switch becomes inevitable. I understand people that say, oh, why am I going to pay more right now to receive less? It just doesn't make any sense. But competition-wise, in the US, maybe not so much, but in Europe, most people drive small cars. The Golf for Volkswagen has been the most successful car because it's small, it's good, it's compact. Do you still see this as a competition? I've seen some announcement from some politicians in the UK for rating the move towards. And look, my parents, we had a Golf for 22 years or something. I wish they switched to a Tesla, but in Europe, Tesla is still pretty expensive compared to the other things that you can get. So we got a T-Roc, I think, T-Cross, one of the two. Tech-wise, it sucks. It's a good upgrade because our car was 22 years old, but I can understand why people don't go to EVs because it's still pretty expensive. So do you see this as an issue going forward?
It's only an issue if companies like Tesla aren't able to go down market. But they are going down market. They are coming out with that compact car that's going to be that golf competitor and we'll see in what kind of configuration it comes out on. It has a 2-seater or 4-seater, whatever it may be. But they are going down the cost curve. And the key thing to remember here is that we're not at the end of the cost curve. The ICE car has been running a cost curve for near 100 years. That's the key thing we have to remember. We've been able to reduce the cost of manufacturing of a gas car for 100 years. And the EV is really in earnest in it for 10 years, maybe. So we have 10x more to go to reach the same level of cost benefits that the gas car has been able to enjoy for the last 100 years. And we're already pretty damn close at cost parity. So we're already better in the luxury market with the Model S and the Model X. We're already, I would argue, better in the mid-luxury market, call it, with the Model Y and Model 3. And as we continue that cost curve down and we ramp up factories and the 480 starts ramping in earnest, we optimize what chemistry and materials to use, we optimize localization, and we come out with new manufacturing technologies. And the Optimus robot starts being part of the process, which reduces a ton of costs because you no longer have to pay a human potentially, which opens up a whole can of worms, but that's for a separate conversation. Now you're starting to become cost competitive truly to a point where, say, in 20 to 30 years time, we're going to look back to this time period and be like, wow, I had no idea EVs were going to be this cheap. In addition to the maintenance, it's not going to be anywhere close to the gas car. So you're going to have a cheaper car that's going to cost less to run, and it will probably drive itself. And that third variable is the one that really lowers costs because you're removing the driver from the equation. And for people that don't have to own a car at all times, the cost of transportation drops down to almost nothing because the only thing you have to pay for essentially is the cost of electricity to go from point A to point B, plus the markup that the fleet provider puts on top of that car. So everything is coalescing around the cost per mile of a transportation unit to be significantly cheaper for an electric vehicle than a gas car. And we're just getting started.
I agree. I think we are just getting started, despite Tesla being close to an $800 billion company. It's really crazy. If you go to someone like my best investment thesis right now is an $800 billion company.
Crazy.
People will eventually notice that EVs are better. We've been talking about advertising, yes, no, for a long, long time. But right now, I think high interest rates is one of the main reasons why we see some slowdown. But where do you see Tesla going from here? We have Cybertruck, Tesla Semi that has to ramp up, Giga Mexico, next gen platform, new Megapack factories. Where do you see Tesla in 2030?
So 2030, Tesla will be the largest manufacturer of automobiles in the world. This is all my opinion, not investment advice. This is my guess. I don't have a crystal ball. Okay, blah, blah, blah. They will be the largest provider of autonomous vehicles in the world by 2030. They will be the largest provider of utility scale battery by 2030, largest provider of solar solutions by 2030, and the most advanced AI company in the world by 2030 with its self-driving cars and humanoid robots. And I think that's what Tesla will be by 2030. So I just described 5 different companies that happen to be under one. This outcome is only possible if you make a gigantic amount of batteries and you have a gigantic amount of data. If you look at Tesla's plans for the next 7 to 10 years with the Master Plan Part 3 even further, and you look at what they're investing in right now, you can see that those variables are very much part of that outcome. They just bought 10,000 or 20,000 H100s, whatever that number was. They're looking to 20x their compute power in the next year and a half. And all of these things are going to enable them to reach that outcome, plus building out Mexico, announcing another gigafactory. And each one of these gigafactories is going to crank out anywhere between 1 to 2 million cars per year. So to get to that magic number of 20 million that they want to get to by 2030, or even 10 million by 2030, you don't need that many more factories. You just need a handful to get to that number because you're going to have so much density from each one of these factories with the release of the compact car and their Gen 3 manufacturing process.
Moving to another company that Elon Musk owns, X. We're closing in on the 1-year anniversary since he bought that thing for $44 billion. Where do you think this platform goes from here?
There's definitely a lot of things that need to clean up for sure. I think what I really enjoy about X now is, as a creator, I can use X as a platform to share my ideas and share my content without any fear of repercussion from the service provider, like a YouTube or something. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how controversial it is or like how much people might dislike it. I can share it there, and that gives me a sense of security, which is great. I like the variety of ideas and concepts that are shared on a daily basis. It's a place I go to get like stimulated from an intelligence perspective. I always trying to learn more. X is literally the best place for me to go, because if I go on Google, it's kind of like a tough place to get good information, because it's whatever Google wants you to see in the first page. And then a lot of these publications are typically mainstream media publications that are either behind a paywall, or even worse, are not really giving you all the detail. You don't see all the pieces. Whereas X, I can go down the rabbit hole of a concept and I see both views all the time. People are constantly fighting for what is the right way of looking at something, which I love. And I get that on my own content. All of a sudden, my replies are, a lot of people are agreeing and positive with it because they're following me. Mm-hmm. But then the people that don't follow me are also throwing in their 2 cents. And those are, to me, more valuable because it forces me to step out of my bubble. So from that perspective, it's phenomenal. I really do enjoy X. However, when it comes to things that they can do better, they can do a lot of things better. I think their video discovery is terrible. Although they've improved the video player, I don't get pushed really videos, or I can search for videos in the same way that YouTube can. YouTube is so far ahead from that perspective. So I look forward to X getting at least toe to toe with YouTube. Then you have their analytics are god awful. So I don't even know really how my videos are truly performing. I have to do a lot of manual processes on their spreadsheets, unlike the exports. I expect X to clean these things up. These are just things that I'm experiencing. Their monetization, I think, can be dramatically improved. And a lot of this just hinges on their ability to show ads and be able to convert those ads into monetization they can send to creators. Like, it's impossible for me to know with confidence why my stuff earns more or earns less. Mm-hmm. For me, I don't really care because I'm very happy where I'm at financially. But as somebody who has a pretty decently sized network of people on X, I get people constantly like, I don't even know why not getting paid more. I got way more impressions. I'm not getting paid more. Like, what's going on? It's a black box. So it's hard to understand. Those are my big three. The web interface, they have to make a decision at some point if they want to keep the web interface or not keep the web interface, because when I post stuff, sometimes the interface is very glitchy. And so I have to type out a whole thing in docs and then paste it onto X, because I wrote a freaking post and then it just disappears. And I'm like, oh my God, I just spent the last hour writing and it's gone. So that lesson learned, right?
Yeah.
But they have made a ton of improvements, man. And I give them a lot of credit for the speed. I wish they did it. Then when they come out with payments and the ability to transfer funds from one user to another, buy stock, buy crypto, all that other stuff that Elon wants to do, that's going to unlock a ton of potential for the platform, because now it's going to be a one-stop shop for markets. It's like, if you want to exchange value for money in a platform, I think X is going to be the place where all that stuff happens. I'm very much looking forward to that, because an account almost becomes like an individual. It's a business, because maybe my account, I can create blogs, I can provide video, I can reply to people, I can become a consultant of sorts with my DMs. And then I can also create a marketplace where people can go buy products from me or buy services from me. So it creates this digital marketplace for an individual where the individual becomes a business. And I think that's extremely empowering in the world where we're going to more and more automated things and more AI things where it could displace a lot of jobs. X could potentially become a place for the individual to become his or her own business and not so much depend on a corporation to be like their only source of income. It has a gigantic amount of potential. It will probably require a pretty massive rewrite. And I think that's what they're going through right now.
I think video discovery is basically non-existent. You post a video, after 24 hours or so, that video is basically buried somewhere in some feeds. But they've made some huge improvements. It's not even a year, and it's a completely different thing. So congrats to their team. Like you said, payments, P2P payments, I think is going to be huge. If you want to start selling merch or stuff like that, I mean, social commerce is extremely big in Asia. I think it's going to be bigger in the West as well. Yeah, the future is definitely bright on X. Two things. First, what's the number one thing on your bucket list?
Oh man, that's a unexpected question. I appreciate it though. Number one thing on my bucket list. Give me a few seconds. I'm really thinking through this one hard. I think I'm gonna go with parenthood. Honestly, yeah. My wife and I want kids, and I'm very much looking forward to being a parent. And that's the biggest one right now, is being a father and raising little minions that can help advance civilization. I used to have a sort of mindset where I wasn't so much anti-kids, like anti-having kids, but I was like, man, it's like the world is kind of like, you're on social media, you see all these things that are wrong with society. Then you start to understand, it's like, hey, it used to be way worse. Like it used to be freaking bad, bro. Like the freaking Mongols can just show up and sack your entire city. And then now you just have to say, yep, I'm with you or I'm dead, right? The world was pretty freaking brutal back in the day. So I think my mindset changed a little bit recently, that I think children can be the solution to a lot of the things that we have as a society, as long as we're good parents and we're setting them up with the proper tools to advance civilization. Once I think in my brain that's clicked for me, I've been very much looking forward to being a parent and doing my best to raise humans that will be a net benefit to society. So yeah, that's my biggest one right now.
Okay, I think this is one of the best answers I got to that question.
Do I win?
I'll get you Belgian chocolates when I come to Austin.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, perfect. Done.
No, I think you're right. I think there was that video that was last week about that woman that talked about, she went to a concert for Beyonce, and that's how good being single without kids is, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, social media can show you that the world is horrible and being single without kids, it's the best life. But I mean, if that was the case, I don't think we would be here, because then our parents wouldn't have kids. The last one, space. Is that something that interests you, going to space?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in going to space. Once a few folks test out the systems and stuff, and more brave people than I go up there, I would love to do like a little weekend or I don't know, a few days, just orbiting around the Earth, without a cell phone, without nothing, maybe just like a notepad or something that I can be creative with, maybe my guitar, and just experience the world while I'm looking at it, And I think that's going to involve a lot of emotions and thoughts that it's impossible to have while you're like in the atmosphere. I would love that. I think it would be just an incredible experience that I hope all of us have access to in the future, because I really feel like it's going to have a material impact in how we think about humanity. I have a feeling once we go up there and we see that, listen, this is where every human you've ever met and have ever read about was there. You can see it. It's right there. Boom, right in front of your eyes. Everything you've ever known about everything is literally right in front of you. I think that's going to have a very great impact for humanity. So I would absolutely love to do it. But going to Mars, that one kind of sucks. I think by the time those systems are ready and people are ready to go, I'm probably going to be in my 50s, maybe even 60s. And I would rather just, a little bit too much. I definitely plan on being around for a long time. I want to take care of myself and all that good stuff. But I don't know, let the next generation do it.
I agree. Space to me is number one, actually, on the bucket list.
Nice.
It will become more and more accessible over time. Technology does wonders. We'll wait and see. Exciting times ahead. So we're gonna end on this high note.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out, and this was an awesome conversation. Excellent questions, super stimulating. Really appreciate you and everything that you do. Make sure, if you haven't subscribed and liked this guy yet, go do it right now, right below this video. And anytime you'd like me to come back, let me know. And we should have you on the channel sometime too. So this was awesome. This was an awesome conversation. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.